Commander Rask Vendor had been dead for 3 years, 17 days. At 14 hours, when the first transmission reached him, the message crackled through the quantum relay buried deep within the asteroid mining station where he'd been hiding, its synthetic voice cutting through the hum of recycled air and distant machinery. Priority 1. Origin, Earth Command. Classification, Redemption Protocol. Commander Vendor, your presence is requested. Rask's scarred fingers paused over the hydroponics bay where he'd been tending to his small crop of earth vegetables, tomatoes, that reminded him of home before everything went to hell. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man officially executed for treason was growing food in exile, while his executioners sat in their marble towers, fat on lies. He built this place with his own hands, salvaging parts from derelict ships and abandoned stations scattered throughout the Kepler belt. For 3 years, he lived as a ghost, sustained by nothing but rage and the knowledge that someday someone would need the truth he carried. The scars across his chest still ached where the energy bolts had torn through him. During his execution, a carefully orchestrated performance that had cost him everything. But his life, the second transmission arrived 6 hours later, this time with encryption keys he recognized from his old unit. His hands shook as he decoded it. The Vorthic hegemony has mobilized their entire fleet. They're claiming humans massacred their diplomatic envoy at Titan Station. They want blood. Rask. All of it. The Council is preparing to surrender our outer colonies to prevent total war. We need you. We need what you know. Admiral Kowalski. Rask's laughter was bitter, echoing off the metal walls of his sanctuary. The same council that had branded him a traitor, that had staged his death to cover their own crimes, now wanted his help. The same Admiral Kowalski, who had personally signed his execution order, was begging for salvation. 3 years ago, Rask had tried to expose the truth about Titan Station. He'd gathered evidence, testimonies, sensor logs, everything needed to prove that the diplomatic massacre had been orchestrated by a faction within Earth Command itself, Hawks who wanted war, with the Vorthic, who believed humanity's expansion required the elimination of alien competitors. They murdered the Vorthic envoys in cold blood, then framed the colony's security forces. When Rask had threatened to go public, they'd silenced him the only way they knew how, with a show trial and a public execution, except their assassin. Lieutenant Yanis Crow had been Rask's friend since basic training. Crow had fired his weapon, all right, but the fatal shots had been carefully placed to wound, not kill. Medical nanites in Rask's bloodstream had simulated death long enough for him to be smuggled out in a body bag. Now, 3 years later, the lie was coming home to roost. Rask pulled up the tactical displays he'd been monitoring from his hidden position. The Vorthic Grand Fleet was indeed mobilizing over 4,000 vessels, from nimble corvettes to massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. Humanity's combined fleet numbered barely 800 ships, most of them scattered across dozens of systems. The odds were impossible. Humanity would be slaughtered unless someone could prove the truth about Titan Station, expose the real culprits, and somehow convince the Vorthic that not all humans were genocidal monsters. Rask looked at his reflection in the dark screen gaunt, face marked by years of exile, eyes that had seen too much, scars that told the story of his death. He could stay here, safe in his anonymity, and watch the species that had betrayed him burn. Or he could do what he'd always done, fight for what was right, even when it meant fighting his own kind. The third transmission was already coming through. This time, it carried the quantum signature of his old ship, the destroyer Unbroken. Someone was calling him home. The Unbroken looked like hell. Rask stared through the porthole of the stolen cargo hauler that had brought him to the rendezvous point, a dead star system on the edge of human space. His former command bore fresh scars across her armored hull, sections of her superstructure replaced with crude patches that spoke of recent combat. Burn marks from plasma cannons traced her flanks like claw marks. "She's still flying," came a familiar voice from behind him. Lieutenant Commander Mira Kessin stepped into the cramped cabin, her uniform crisp despite the circumstances. She'd been his tactical officer before his death, one of the few who'd believed in his innocence. "Barely. How many did we lose?" Rask asked, not turning from the window. 17 ships in the Proxima engagement last week. The Vorthic hit our patrol fleet with everything they had. Captain Reeves bought us time to evacuate the colonies, but she paused. He didn't make it out. Rask felt the familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the burden of command, of lives lost under his responsibility. Reeves had been a good officer, better than most. Now he was space dust because of a lie Rask had failed to expose 3 years ago. "What's our tactical situation?" he asked. Kessin activated a holographic display between them. The three-dimensional map showed the current disposition of forces across human space. Red markers for Vorthic fleets, blue for human positions. The red vastly outnumbered the blue. They've taken the Outer Rim colonies without a fight most. Populations evacuated before they arrived. But they're not stopping. Intelligence suggests they're planning a massive assault on the core systems within the week. Earth itself is the primary target, and the Council, still claiming the Titan Station massacre was the work of rogue elements. They've offered to turn over the supposed perpetrators for Vorthic justice. Rask's jaw tightened. He knew exactly who the Council planned to sacrifice the same colony. Security officers who'd been framed in the first place. Men and women who'd done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place. When the Hawks decided to start their war, "I need to speak with the Vorthic directly," he said. "Rask, they're not in a talking mood. They've declared total war. Any human vessel that enters their space gets vaporized without warning, then we make them listen." The docking was rough, the Unbroken's damaged systems struggling to maintain proper alignment. When Rask stepped aboard his former command, he was greeted by faces he thought he'd never see again. Lieutenant Yanis Crow, the man who killed him, stood at attention with tears in his eyes. Chief Engineer Voss saluted with a prosthetic arm that hadn't been there 3 years ago. Navigator Pike looked like she'd aged a decade. "Welcome back, Commander," Crow said formally, then broke protocol by embracing his old friend. "God, it's good to see you alive." "Save the reunion for later," Rask said, though he gripped Crow's shoulder tightly. "What's our current heading?" "Admiral Kowalski ordered us to rendezvous with the main fleet at Jupiter Station." Captain Torres reported she'd taken command of the Unbroken after Rask's death and wore the responsibility well despite her youth. "But sir, I should mention there are elements within the fleet who still consider you a traitor. Some of the newer officers, they don't know the truth." Rask nodded grimly. "How many ships can we count on?" "About 60 vessels whose captains remember you from the border wars. Maybe another 20 who've heard the real story through back channels. The rest," Torres shrugged, "they'll follow orders, but they won't follow you. Not without proof." "Then we'll have to get proof." Kessin pulled up another display. "The original evidence you gathered about Titan Station. It was destroyed when they raided your quarters after the trial. But sir, there might be another way. The Vorthic diplomatic ship that was attacked, the heart of HFY parts of its hull were salvaged and brought back to Earth. The wreckage is being held at the Lunar Forensics Facility, under heavy guard, no doubt. Maximum security, but the facility's defenses were designed to keep people out, not in. And with most of the fleet deployed against the Vorthic advance, they're operating with a skeleton crew." Rask studied the tactical display, his mind already working through the possibilities. Getting to Luna would mean passing through the heart of the solar system's defenses. It would mean facing ships crewed by officers who thought he was a dead traitor, who would fire on him without hesitation. But the wreckage of the heart of HFY contained the truth forensic evidence that would prove the weapons used in the massacre were human, not Vorthic. Energy signatures that would trace back to specific Earth command vessels. Data that could stop a war. "Set course for Luna," he ordered. "Full stealth approach." "Sir," Torres said carefully, "if we're caught, they won't just execute us. They'll brand every ship that follows you as mutineers. Your crew, your allies, they'll all pay the price." Rask looked around the bridge at the faces of men and women who'd already died for him once, who were willing to do it again. The weight of their trust was almost unbearable. "Then we better not get caught." The ambush came at the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Contact bearing to 70, multiple signatures emerging from the asteroid field. Navigator Pike's voice cut through the bridge with practiced urgency. 12 frigates for destroyers, and she paused, recalibrating her sensors. "Jesus Christ, sir, that's the dreadnought Retribution." Rask felt eyes crystallize in his veins. The Retribution was Admiral Kowalski's flagship, a kilometer-long monster bristling with enough firepower to level a small moon. Either Kowalski had learned of his mission and moved to intercept, or this was the most catastrophic coincidence in military history. "Communications incoming," reported Lieutenant Torres from the comm station. "Admiral Kowalski wants to speak with you directly, sir." the main screen flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Fleet Admiral Marcus Kowalski, the man who'd been Rask's mentor during the border wars, who'd signed his execution order, who'd called him back from the dead. His expression was unreadable. "Commander Vendor," Kowalski said formally, "you're significantly off course from our agreed rendezvous." "Admiral," Rask stepped forward, not bothering to hide his destination. "The evidence we need is on Luna. The wreckage from the heart of Kithara is classified beyond your clearance level, even if you weren't officially dead." Kowalski's eyes were hard. "Turn around, Commander." "That's an order. I can't do that, sir." "You mean you won't?" The channel crackled with tension. Around them, Rask could see the tactical display updating as more ships moved into position. The Unbroken and her small escort of loyalist vessels were completely surrounded, 16 to 5 odds, with the enemy holding a massive firepower advantage. "Admiral," Rask said carefully, with respect, "the Vorthic fleet will reach Earth in 4 days. If we can prove what really happened at Titan Station." "What happened at Titan Station? Is that we lost control of the situation?" Kowalski interrupted. "What happened is that naive idealists like you couldn't understand that sometimes peace requires terrible choices. The Vorthic were never going to accept human expansion into the Outer Rim. War was inevitable." The admission hit Rask like a physical blow. You knew about the massacre, and you covered it up." "I ordered it." Kowalski's voice was flat, emotionless. "The diplomatic envoy was a scouting mission. They were mapping our defenses, cataloging our weaknesses. Within 5 years, they would have launched their own war of conquest. We struck first, by murdering diplomats under a flag of truce, by eliminating a threat to human survival. Something you were always too soft to understand. The bridge of the Unbroken was silent except for the hum of systems and the distant whisper of recycled air. Rask's crew stared at the screen in horror, finally hearing the truth they'd suspected but never wanted to believe. "Sir," Kesson whispered, "incoming missile lock from the Retribution. Multiple targeting solutions active." Kowalski leaned forward. "Commander Vendor, you have 30 seconds to surrender your vessels and submit to arrest. If you refuse, I will consider you and your followers to be enemy combatants and act accordingly." Rask looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, Crow at the weapons station, his hands hovering over the firing controls, Voss monitoring the engines, ready to push them beyond safe limits, Pike calculating jump solutions even though there was nowhere to run, Torres standing at his shoulder, waiting for orders she knew might get them all killed. They'd followed him into death once. They were willing to do it again. "Admiral," Rask said slowly, "those wreckage samples contain quantum-tagged isotope signatures from Earth Command weapons. They prove human involvement in the massacre. The Vorthic have the same data. That's why they're so certain of human guilt. If we can show them that the real culprits are being held accountable, the real culprits are doing what needs to be done to preserve our species." Kowalski's composure finally cracked. "You think the Vorthic care about justice? They want us extinct. This war was coming whether we acted or not. 20 seconds to compliance." "Sir," Kesson reported. Rask closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. And for days, the Vorthic Grand Fleet would reach Earth. Billions would die in the crossfire, unless someone could prove the truth, could show that humanity was capable of justice even when it meant punishing their own. "All ships," he said into the calm. "This is Commander Vendor. What we're about to do will brand us as traitors in the eyes of Earth Command. But we're not fighting for Earth Command. We're fighting for the idea that humanity can be better than its worst impulses. We're fighting for the truth." He opened his eyes and looked directly at Kowalski's image on the screen. "Admiral, I can't surrender. Too many people have already died for this lie. 10 seconds, all ships, evasive maneuvers, scatter pattern Delta 7. The Unbroken shuddered as her engines fired at maximum burn, throwing Rask against his command chair. Around them, the 5 loyalist ships broke formation, each taking a different vector as dozens of missiles streaked toward their positions. "Direct hit on the Defiance," Pike reported. "She's venting atmosphere and debris." The first salvo was devastating. The destroyer Defiance took 3 direct hits amidships, her reactor containment failing in a brilliant flash that illuminated the asteroid field. The frigate Swift Current lost her engines and began tumbling helplessly through space. But Rask's people weren't just running. They were fighting back. "Target the Retribution sensor array," he ordered. "If we can blind her, we might have a chance." The battle that followed was brief, brutal, and utterly one-sided. But in those desperate minutes, something extraordinary happened. 3 ships managed to break through the blockade, their hulls scarred and systems failing, but still flying. The Unbroken, the heavy cruiser Indomitable, and the fast frigate Ghost Runner made the jump to lunar space, while their companions died to buy them passage. Behind them, the wreckage of the Defiance and the Swift Current drifted among the asteroids, tombstones for crews who died believing that truth was worth any sacrifice. The real war was just beginning. The lunar defense grid should have been impregnable. Rask studied the tactical overlay as the Unbroken drifted in the shadow of Luna's largest crater, her engines cold and her reactor signature masked by the moon's own electromagnetic field. 47 orbital defense platforms surrounded Earth's satellite, each mounting enough firepower to vaporize a cruiser. The forensics facility sat at the heart of this defensive web, a gleaming complex built into the lunar regolith itself. Sir, Kessin reported from her station, the facility's got its own garrison, to companies of Marines, plus automated defense systems. Even if we get past the orbital platforms, breaking it won't be quiet. We don't need quiet, Rask replied. We need fast. Chief Engineer Voss looked up from his damage assessment. The Indomitable took heavy damage in the asteroid belt. Her jump drive is offline, and she's got hull breaches on 3 decks. Captain Hendricks reports she can fight, but she can't run. And the Ghost Runner? Captain Martinez says his ship is ready for anything, but he's got a crew of 37 against a facility defended by over 300. Rask nodded grimly. 3 ships against the most heavily defended installation in the solar system, with one of those ships barely holding together. The odds were suicidal, but they'd been suicidal since the moment he decided to come back from the dead. There's something else, Torres said quietly, intelligence intercept from Admiral Kowalski's fleet. They're moving to Earth orbit. He's declared martial law and suspended civilian government. The words hit like a physical blow. He's staging a coup. Gets worse, sir. He's announced that you and your terrorist cell are working with the Vorthek. Claims the attack on his fleet proves human-alien collaboration. Every major news network is running the story. Rask's hands clenched into fists. Kowalski wasn't just covering up the original massacre, he was using it as justification to seize complete control of human space. By the time the Vorthek fleet arrived, he'd have consolidated power and could claim any outcome as a victory. How long until the Vorthek reach Earth? He asked. 72 hours, Pike reported. Their advanced scouts are already probing the outer system defenses. 72 hours to break into an impregnable facility, steal evidence that might not even exist anymore, and somehow convince a genocidal alien fleet to listen to reason. All while being hunted as traitors by their own people. Sir, Kama. New voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission. It's from the lunar facility itself. The face that appeared on screen was young, probably no more than 25, with the pale complexion of someone who'd spent too long in artificial environments. She wore the uniform of a junior forensics technician, her expression desperate. Commander Vendor, my name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I've been monitoring your communications since you entered lunar space. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. Sir, I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do, and I want the help. Rask leaned forward. Doctor, this conversation is being monitored by... No, it's not. I've isolated this channel using equipment from the evidence vault. Sir, I've been analyzing the wreckage from the heart of Kithara for the past 6 months. The quantum signatures, the isotope traces, the weapon impact patterns, everything proves human involvement in the massacre. Can you transmit the data? That's the problem. The evidence is physically isolated in a quantum-shielded vault. It can't be transmitted or copied. It has to be retrieved in person. And sir, she paused. Colonel Brennan knows what the evidence proves. He's been under orders to destroy it the moment your fleet approaches. Colonel Marcus Brennan. Rask remembered him from the tribunal that had condemned him to death, a hawk who'd made his career by advocating for preemptive strikes against alien civilizations. If Brennan was in charge of the facility, he'd torch the evidence rather than let us see daylight. How much time do we have? Minutes, maybe less. He's already ordered the vault sealed. But sir, there's another way. The primary evidence chamber has an emergency evacuation system, shoots the entire vault into space. If the facility is breached, it was designed to prevent alien capture of sensitive data. But if you could intercept the vault in transit, Rask's mind raced through the possibilities. It would mean coordinating a precise attack on the facility, while simultaneously intercepting a projectile launched at high velocity into the void. The timing would have to be perfect, and they'd only get one chance. All ships, he ordered, prepare for assault. Target the facility's primary power grid. I want those defensive systems down for exactly 90 seconds. No more, no less. The attack began with the Ghost Runner decloaking at point-blank range from the nearest defense platform. Captain Martinez had volunteered for the suicide mission, using his ship's superior speed to get inside the defensive perimeter before the platforms could react. His torpedoes took out 3 orbital guns before return fire reduced his ship to expanding plasma. The Indomitable followed seconds later, her damaged hull absorbing tremendous punishment as she closed on the facility itself. Captain Hendricks kept firing even as his ship's superstructure began to collapse, his weapons targeting the power substations that fed the complex's defensive grid, and the Unbroken dove straight down, using Luna's gravity well to accelerate past the speed where the remaining platforms could track her accurately. Ras felt his teeth rattle as the ship shook under multiple impacts, but Voss's engineering crew kept the engines running through sheer determination. Facility defenses are down, Kessin reported. Vault ejection in 3, 2, 1. A small projectile shot out from the lunar surface at tremendous velocity, its trajectory carrying it toward deep space. If they missed the intercept, the evidence would be lost forever in the void between stars. Got it, Pike shouted. Tractor beam lock established, but their victory was short-lived. The Indomitable was breaking apart under concentrated fire from the surviving defense platforms, her hull buckling as atmosphere vented into space. Captain Hendricks' final transmission was brief. Tell them we died for the truth. As the Unbroken limped away from Luna with the precious evidence vault secured in her cargo bay, 2 more ships had been added to the growing tally of those who'd sacrificed everything for a chance at justice. The evidence was theirs. Now they just had to live long enough to use it. The Vorthic Grand Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, like a plague of metal locusts. Rask watched the tactical display with growing horror as sensor contacts multiplied across the screen. 4,000 ships of various classes, from nimble fighters to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed Earth's largest vessels. At the center of the formation, a single massive construct that defied classification, the Throne of Worlds, a mobile fortress the size of a small moon. Sir, Black reported, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. They're not slowing down. Direct course for Earth at maximum velocity. The defense of Earth had been hastily organized in the 72 hours since Kowalski's fleet had taken control of the system. Admiral Chen's second fleet held the outer perimeter near Jupiter, while Admiral Morrison's home guard formed a defensive line at Mars. The orbital defense platforms around Earth itself bristled with weapons, but everyone knew they wouldn't be enough. Humanity's entire combined fleet numbered 837 vessels. They were outnumbered almost 5 to 1. Communications from Admiral Chen. Torres reported, he's requesting you take command of the outer perimeter defense. Rask almost laughed. The same officer corps that had branded him a traitor now wanted him to save them from their own lives. But lives hung in the balance. Billions of civilians on Earth and throughout the system who had no part in the military's deception. Signal all ships, he ordered. The Unbroken will coordinate with Admiral Chen's fleet. But first, I need to try something. He turned to Dr. Vasquez, who had been working frantically in the ship's science lab since they'd escaped from Luna. Doctor, is that evidence package ready? The young forensics expert looked exhausted, but determined. Everything's here, Commander. Quantum-tagged isotope signatures proving the weapons used were of human manufacture. Energy patterns matching Earth Command military specifications. Even genetic material from the assault team. They were all human special forces. Can you transmit it to the Vorthic flagship? I can transmit it to every ship in both fleets simultaneously. But sir, will they even listen? Ras stared at the approaching armada. We're about to find out. The transmission went out on all frequencies, broadcast in 17 languages including the complex harmonics of Vorthic speech. For 30 seconds, the evidence played across every screen in both fleets, irrefutable proof that the Titan station massacre had been perpetrated by humans, but by a specific faction that had acted without authorization. The response was immediate and devastating. Sir, Kessin shouted, the Vorthic fleet is accelerating. They're ignoring the evidence completely. On the main screen, the alien commander's response appeared. A Vorthic admiral whose chitinous features were twisted, With rage, when he spoke, his words were translated into cold, mechanical English. Humans seek to divide blame when all are guilty. You show us proof of your species' treachery, then ask for mercy? There can be no peace between us. There can be only extinction. The Battle of the Solar System began at 1427 Terran Standard Time. Admiral Chen's Second Fleet met the Vorthic Vanguard at the Jupiter Orbital Defense Grid, and the carnage was immediate. Vorthic plasma cannons tore through human shields like paper, while return fire seemed to barely scratch their biometallic hulls. The heavy cruiser Thunderbolt took a direct hit amidships and simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a flash of superheated plasma. All ships, concentrate fire on their escort vessels. Chen's voice cut through the tactical network. Don't waste ammunition on the big ones. But the Vorthic had learned. From their previous encounters with human forces, their smaller ships moved. In perfect coordination, their formation shifting like a living organism. When the destroyer Falcon tried to close on a Vorthic frigate, 3 more alien ships converged on her position, their combined firepower reducing her to debris in seconds. The Unbroken dove into the melee, her weapons targeting the command nodes. That seemed to coordinate each Vorthic squadron. Rask had studied alien tactics during his years of exile, and he'd noticed patterns in their combat formations. If they could disrupt the command structure, direct hit on the lead coordinator, Kessin reported. Their formation is breaking up. For a moment, it seemed like the tactic might work. Several Vorthic squadrons faltered as their command ships were destroyed, their perfect coordination dissolving into individual combat. Human fighters swarmed through the gaps, their missiles and energy weapons finally finding vulnerable targets. But the aliens adapted quickly. New command nodes emerged from the fleet's rear ranks, re-establishing control over the scattered squadrons, and their retaliation was swift and merciless. The Dreadnought Indefatigable was Admiral Chen's flagship, a kilometer-long monster that had served as the backbone of the Second Fleet for over a decade. Rask watched in horror as 6 Vorthic battleships converged on her position, their plasma cannons firing in perfect synchronization. The Indefatigable shields held for perhaps 10 seconds before catastrophic failure cascaded through her systems. This is Admiral Chen. Came the final transmission from the dying ship. All remaining vessels, fall back to Mars perimeter. Do not let them. The channel went dead as the Indefatigable broke in half, her reactor core detonating in a miniature star that illuminated the entire battlefield. The retreat from Jupiter was a running battle that lasted 18 hours. Of the 240 ships that had formed the outer perimeter, only 93 made it to Mars. Behind them, the Vorthic fleet continued its inexorable advance, leaving fields of human wreckage in their wake. Admiral Morrison's home guard was waiting at Mars, dug in behind the orbital defense platforms and asteroid-mounted weapons batteries. It was humanity's last organized line of defense before Earth itself. The Martian defense grid was the product of 50 years of engineering overlapping fields of fire, from hundreds of weapons platforms protected by energy shields that could theoretically withstand anything short of a direct nuclear strike. It had never been tested in combat. It lasted 17 minutes. The throne of worlds emerged from the Vorthic formation, like a nightmare made manifest. Its weapons systems larger than most human ships. When it fired, entire sections of the defense grid simply vanished, vaporized by energies that made human plasma cannons look like children's toys. Sir, Torres whispered, staring at the tactical display in shock. We're losing everything. Every ship, every platform, every defense we have. Around them, the bridge crew watched their species' death unfold on the screens. The heavy cruiser Vengeful took a direct hit from a Vorthic dreadnought and exploded in a fireball visible from Mars itself. The battleship Sovereign tried to ram one of the alien command ships and was swatted aside like an insect, her hull crumpling under weapons that bent the laws of physics. But in the depths of defeat, something extraordinary happened. Individual ships began breaking from their formations, not in retreat, but in desperate, suicidal attacks on the alien fleet. The destroyer captain, who lost his wife in the Jupiter battle, rammed his ship into a Vorthic cruiser at full velocity. Fighter pilots, whose ammunition was exhausted, dove their craft into alien weapons batteries. Humanity was losing the battle, but they were making the victory cost everything the Vorthic had. Sir, Kessin said quietly, Admiral Morrison is gone. The Righteous took a direct hit from the alien flagship. We're in command of what's left of the fleet. Rast looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had followed him through death and back again, through betrayal and exile, through battles that should have destroyed them. Now they were asking him to lead them into the final battle, the one they couldn't win. Signal all remaining ships. He said, we're falling back to Earth. Whatever happens there, we make our last stand inside of home. Earth hung before them like a blue jewel, her surface unmarked by the carnage that had consumed the outer system. But that peace was about to end. The remnants of humanity's combined fleet formed a ragged defensive line between the Vorthic Armada and Earth's orbital defense platforms. 73 ships against 4,000, their hulls scarred and their crews exhausted. Many had been fighting continuously for 36 hours, their ammunition low and their systems failing. Rask stood on the bridge of the Unbroken, staring at the tactical display. That showed their impossible situation. The Vorthic fleet was decelerating from their system crossing burn, taking up attack positions around Earth's moon. They weren't in any hurry. They knew humanity's remaining forces couldn't threaten them. Sir, Dr. Vasquez said from the science station she'd taken over, I'm detecting massive energy buildup from the Throne of Worlds. Whatever weapon system they're charging, it's unlike anything we've seen before. Planet killer, Kessin asked grimly. Worse, the energy pattern suggests some kind of atmospheric ignition weapon. They're not just planning to destroy Earth, they want to turn the entire atmosphere into a firestorm. The implications hit everyone on the bridge simultaneously, not just the death of humanity, but the complete sterilization of their homeworld. Every living thing on Earth would burn in a matter of minutes. How long until they can fire? Rask asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. They're using the moon's gravitational field to stabilize whatever they're building. Rask closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his species' survival pressing down on him. In 6 hours, it would all be over, unless, Doctor, you said they're using the moon for gravitational stabilization. What happens if that stability is disrupted? Vasquez looked up from her calculations, her eyes widening. The weapon system would destabilize. The energy discharge could feed back into their ship's power grid. But sir, to disrupt Luna's gravitational field would require a massive explosion in close proximity. Rask finished, something with enough force to shift the moon's orbit. The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what he was suggesting. The Unbroken still carried the nuclear warheads from her original armament weapons, designed to crack asteroids and eliminate enemy installations. If they could somehow deliver those warheads to Luna's surface, sir, Torres said quietly, even if we could get close enough, the explosion would need to be precisely timed and positioned. Someone would have to manually detonate the charges. I know, Rask replied. Signal the fleet. I need volunteers for a special mission. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every surviving ship in the fleet volunteered their crews for what amounted to a suicide mission. Fighter pilots who'd been flying for days without rest. Engineering crews whose ships were held together by determination and prayer. Marines who'd lost everything in the earlier battles. But Rask had a different plan. All ships except the Unbroken will engage the Vorthic fleet directly. Full attack, no holding back. Make them think we're attempting one final, desperate assault. Sir, Captain Torres looked confused. While they're focused on the fleet battle, the Unbroken will make a stealth approach to Luna. We'll land the warheads manually and detonate them from the surface. Commander, Crow said from the weapons station, the lunar surface is crawling with Vorthic forces. They've established defensive positions around their weapon platform. Getting to the detonation point will be impossible. Rask finished. I know. That's why we're not going alone. He activated the fleet communication system, his voice carrying to every remaining human ship. This is Commander Vendor. In 6 hours, the enemy will destroy our world and everyone on it. But they've made a mistake. They've anchored their super weapon to Luna's gravitational field. If we can disrupt that field, we can turn their own weapon against them. He paused, looking around the bridge at faces that had followed him through impossible odds. I won't lie to you. This is a one-way mission. But if we succeed, if we can buy Earth even a few more hours, maybe someone else can find a way to stop. Then permanently, every ship that volunteers for the surface assault won't be coming back. The responses came immediately. Captain Rodriguez of the heavy cruiser Defiant, we're with you, Commander. Commander Park of the destroyer Swift Justice wouldn't miss it for the world. Wing Leader Hassan of the 47th Fighter Squadron, sir, we've been dying for 3 days. At least this time it'll mean something. 17 ships broke from the defensive formation, their crews volunteering for certain death. The remaining vessels under Admiral Morrison's former deputy. began their suicidal attack on the main Vortic fleet. Drawing attention away from Luna. The Battle of Luna began at 2:15 Terran Standard Time, the unbroken approach from the moon's dark side, using Luna's own mass to mask her approach from Vortic sensors. But as soon as they cleared the horizon, the enemy positions became visible. Hundreds of defensive installations carved into the lunar surface, their weapons trained on the approaching human ships. Multiple missile locks, Kessin reported. They've been waiting for us. The lunar assault was a nightmare of vacuum combat and close-quarters fighting. Human Marines in powered armor leaped from drop pods onto the lunar surface, their weapons firing streams of superheated plasma at Vortic defensive positions. The aliens responded with weapons that seemed to bend space itself, creating gravitational shears that tore human soldiers apart. Captain Rodriguez's Defiant took massive damage. In the first wave, her hull cracked open by Vortic energy weapons. But her crew kept fighting even as atmosphere vented into space, using their ship's death throes to clear a landing zone for the ground forces. Landing zone secured, came the report from Major Kim, leading the Marine assault. But sir, we're taking heavy casualties. These alien weapons are unlike anything we faced. Rask watched through the tactical displays as red markers human positions winked out one by one. The destroyer Swift Justice crash-landed near the primary Vortic installation, her crew emerging from the wreckage to continue the fight on foot with personal weapons. Sir, Dr. Vasquez reported, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the Throne of Worlds. They're accelerating their firing sequence. How long? 2 hours, maybe less. The nuclear warheads had to be positioned at precise points around Luna's south pole, where the gravitational effects would be maximized. But each position was defended by concentrated Vortic forces, and the human assault was being torn apart by alien weapons that defied understanding. Commander Park is down, came a report from the surface. The Swift Justice crew is pinned down. At Checkpoint Gamma, Wing Leader Hassan's fighters are making bombing runs on the alien positions, but they're losing the birds for every target destroyed. Rask made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All ships, concentrate everything on the primary detonation point. Forget the secondary positions if we can't get all the charges placed. We'll make do with what we have. It was a desperate gamble. Without the full array of nuclear charges, the gravitational disruption might not be enough to destabilize the Vortic weapon. But with human forces being slaughtered across the lunar surface, it was their only chance. The final assault on the primary detonation point was led by the Marines. From the Unbroken herself, Lieutenant Commander Kessin took a squad of volunteers into the Vortic installation, fighting room by room through corridors that seemed to shift and change around them. This is Kessin, came her voice over the comm, distorted by energy interference. We've reached the target zone, but Jesus, sir, there's something down here. Some kind of Vortic command center, and they're not just soldiers, they're civilians, families. The revelation hit Rask like a physical blow. The Vortic weren't just a military force, they were refugees, fleeing something even worse than the war they brought to humanity. Commander, Dr. Vasquez whispered, the energy readings from their homeworld. I think I understand now. Their star is dying. They're not invading our space, they're looking for a new home. Kessin, Rask said into the comm, place the charges, and get out. That's an order, sir. There are children down here. Vortic children. If we detonate these warheads, Lieutenant Commander, millions of human children will die if we don't. Place the charges. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Then, charges placed and armed, sir. Timer set for 60 seconds. We won't be making it out. The nuclear detonation lit up Luna's south pole like a miniature sun, the explosion visible from Earth itself. The gravitational shock wave rippled through space, destabilizing the Throne of Worlds weapon system just as it reached critical charge. But instead of destroying the alien flagship, something unexpected happened. The feedback cascade caused the Throne of Worlds to broadcast a signal across all frequencies. A signal that carried the dying words of the Vortic refugees Kessin had found in the lunar installation. And for the first time since the war began, both sides stopped fighting to listen. The transmission that ended the war lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. It began with the voice of a Vortic child, her words translated by the same systems that had broadcast humanity's evidence of the Titan Station massacre. She spoke of a dying star, of ships packed with refugees fleeing a homeworld that would soon be consumed by stellar collapse. She spoke of fear, of desperation, Parents who made terrible choices because they saw no other option for their children's survival. Then came other voices, Vorthic civilians, scientists, even military officers, all telling the same story. Their civilization was dying. The diplomatic mission to Titan Station hadn't been a scouting expedition for conquest. It had been a desperate plea for sanctuary, for some corner of human space where their people could survive. The massacre had destroyed their last hope for peaceful coexistence. Rask stood on the bridge of the Unbroken, listening to the alien voices with tears streaming down his face. Around him, his crew, what was left of it, stared at the screens in stunned silence. In the tactical display, both fleets had ceased firing, their weapons powered down as the transmission continued. "Sir," Dr. Vasquez whispered, "the energy patterns from the Throne of Worlds. It's not just a warship, it's an ark. There are millions of civilians aboard that vessel." The final voice in the transmission belonged to the Vorthic fleet commander, the same admiral who had declared humanity's extinction only hours before. But now his words carried a different tone. "Humans of Earth," the translated voice said, "we came to your space-seeking refuge and found only death. Our young died on your station, murdered while carrying messages of peace. In our grief and rage, we chose the path of vengeance. But vengeance has brought only more death to your people and to ours." The transmission paused, and when it resumed, the admiral's voice was thick with exhaustion. "The explosion that has disrupted our weapon has also damaged our life support systems. Our children, our families, they are dying as we speak. We face a choice: spend our final hours in mutual destruction, or another pause." Then, Commander Vendor of the human vessel Unbroken, you broadcast evidence of your own people's crimes. You showed us that not all humans share the guilt of those who murdered our diplomats. We asked for parley." The bridge erupted in shocked murmurs, but Rask raised his hand for silence. Through the view screen, he could see the massive alien flagship, no longer a weapon of destruction, but a dying ark carrying the remnants of an entire civilization. "Open a channel," he ordered. The face that appeared on screen was unlike anything Rask had ever seen. Kindness, features marked by what could only be grief, compound eyes that reflected an intelligence both alien and familiar. The Vorthic admiral looked every bit as exhausted as Rask felt. "I am Fleet Admiral Keffer of the Hegemony," the alien said. "I speak for 2 billion souls who have nowhere else to go." "Commander Rask Vendor, representing what's left of Earth's combined fleet," Rask replied. "Admiral, I'm sorry. What happened at Titan Station was a crime committed by a faction within our military. Those responsible have been removed from power. It wasn't entirely true. Admiral Kowalski still controlled much of Earth's government, but it was true enough for the moment. Your transmission included evidence of this," Keffer acknowledged. "But our dead remain dead. Commander, justice delayed is not justice denied, but it does not resurrect the murdered." "No," Rask agreed, "it doesn't. But Admiral, your weapon system, the atmospheric ignition device, if you had used it, you would have killed 5 billion innocent people who had nothing to do with the massacre." The alien admiral's features shifted in what might have been shame. "In our pain, we saw only enemies. We forgot that civilizations are made of individuals, not just governments and militaries." Rask took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would determine the fate of both species. "Admiral, your life support systems are failing. Your people are dying, but Earth has orbital habitats, colony worlds, space stations that could house refugees. We have the technology to save your people. After what we have done to yours," Keffer's voice carried disbelief, "we have destroyed your fleets, killed thousands of your soldiers. Why would you offer sanctuary to your enemies?" Rask looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew, humans who had lost friends, family, entire worlds to this war, but in their expressions, he saw not hatred, but understanding. They were all refugees now, all survivors of a conflict that should never have begun. "Because," Rask said slowly, "someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to choose forgiveness over vengeance, cooperation over conquest. If we don't, both our species will die, yours from your failing life support, ours from the guilt of letting it happen." The negotiation that followed lasted 14 hours and involved representatives from both fleets, the surviving Earth government, and Vorthic civilian leaders. It was messy, complicated, and fraught with mistrust from both sides, but gradually, a framework emerged. The Vorthic refugees would be granted sanctuary in human space, but in exchange, Their military technology would be shared to help defend against whatever had forced them to flee. Their dying homeworld, the conspirators behind the Titan Station massacre, would face justice and join human Vorthic tribunals. Most importantly, both species would work together to prepare for the greater threat that lurked in the darkness. Between stars, Admiral Kowalski's coup collapsed within hours of the ceasefire announcement, faced with overwhelming evidence of his crimes and the reality of humanity's survival depending on cooperation with former enemies. His support evaporated. He was arrested by his own officers and transferred to Earth for trial. 3 months later, Rask stood in the observation deck of Orbital Station Liberty, watching Vorthic civilian transports dock alongside human merchant vessels. Alien families disembarked alongside human refugees from the devastated outer colonies, their children playing together in the station's common areas despite the language barriers. Dr. Vasquez approached, carrying a data pad with the latest reports. From the Joint Science Committees, Commander, the Vorthic astronomers have confirmed our worst fears. The threat that destroyed their homeworld is moving this way. We have maybe 10 years before it reaches human space. Rask nodded grimly. The Devourers, as the Vorthic called them, were some kind of mechanical intelligence that consumed entire star systems, converting matter into more of themselves. They had already destroyed dozens of civilizations, and humanity's solar system was directly in their path. How are the joint defense preparations going? He asked. Better than expected. Vorthic biotechnology combined with human engineering is producing some remarkable innovations. The new hybrid warships are testing at twice the combat effectiveness of anything either species. Built separately, and the other governments? The alien civilizations the Vorthic contacted during their flight. 3 more species have agreed to join the alliance. The Chimists brought their shield technology. The Threx contributed their quantum computers, and the Zephyrians. Vasquez paused. Well, let's just say their weapons make human nukes look like firecrackers. Rask smiled, watching a group of mixed human and Vorthic children chase each other through the station's corridors. 10 years ago, such a sight would have been unimaginable. Now it represented hope, the possibility that different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. Sir, came a voice from behind him. Lieutenant Commander Kesson approached, her prosthetic arm gleaming in the station's artificial light. She'd survived the lunar assault, barely, and had become the first human to undergo Vorthic medical treatment. The alien biotechnology had saved her life and given her capabilities no purely human soldier had ever possessed. The Joint Fleet is ready for its first patrol mission, she reported. Admiral Keffer has requested that you take command of the combined forces. And Admiral Kowalski's trial concluded yesterday. He was found guilty on all charges. But sir, in his final statement, he said something interesting. He claimed he regretted the methods, but not the outcome, that without the war, humanity never would have formed the alliance. We need to face the Devourers. Rask considered this. In a twisted way, Kowalski might have been right. If the Titan Station massacre hadn't happened, the Vorthic might have died quietly in space, and humanity would have faced the Devourers alone and unprepared. History is written by the survivors, Rask mused. Maybe someday, scholars will debate whether the war was a necessary tragedy or just a tragedy, but right now, we have work to do. As he walked toward the docking bay, where his new flagship waited, a hybrid vessel that combined the best of human and Vorthic technology, Rask reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He died for a lie, been resurrected by truth, and helped forge an alliance from the ashes of war. The Covenant, his new ship, bore the scars and the lessons of both species' conflicts. Her hull was marked with memorial plates honoring the dead, from both sides, humans and Vorthic, who had died because of lies, fear, and misunderstanding. But she also carried hope. In her cargo bays were the seeds of new colonies where both species could build a future together. In her laboratories, scientists from multiple worlds worked to develop weapons that could stand against the Devourers. In her crew quarters, former enemies had become allies, bound together by the understanding that survival required cooperation. As the Covenant departed Orbital Station Liberty on humanity's first joint patrol with their former enemies, Rask thought about the long road ahead. The Devourers were coming, and the Alliance would face tests that made the recent war look like a minor skirmish. But for the first time since he'd been declared dead 3 years ago, Rask felt genuinely hopeful. Humanity had proven they could overcome their worst impulses when survival was at stake. They learned to see former enemies as future allies, to choose truth over comfortable lies. The stars ahead were full of dangers that neither species could face alone. But together, they just might have a chance. After all, someone had to stand against the darkness. Someone had to fight for the right of all sentient beings to exist, to grow, to reach for something better than mere survival. And if that fight required former enemies to become family, if it required the dead to rise again in service of truth, if it required ordinary people to become legends, well, that's what humans did best. They endured, they adapted, they survived. And sometimes, when the stakes were high enough, they transcended everything they thought they were capable of. The war was over. The alliance had begun. The real battle for the future was just starting.